This is Shira Rubinoff, president of Cybersphere, a Futurum Group company. I'm on the road with 6.5 here at RSA 2024. I'm very happy to be joined by Akiba Saeedi, VP, IBM Security, Product Management, and Data Security, as well as Scott McCarthy, Partner, Product Management and Cybersecurity Services. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Scott and Akiba, can you please introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them a little about yourselves and the role that you have here at IBM.
Sure. My name is Scott McCarthy. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts, and I have a 25-year career in cybersecurity. I lead product management for cybersecurity services. It's a consulting and managed security services portfolio.
And hi, everyone. My name's Akiba. I live in New York, my favorite city in the world. And I lead our product management for our data security portfolio. So we are all about protecting data. And I'm a little younger than Scott in terms of the cybersecurity time, about 9 years, but more than 20 in a lot of different enterprise software spaces. So happy to be here and talk about all the cool new stuff going on.
Excellent. Well, welcome. So much buzz about AI, certainly here at RSA, but that's been the topic on everybody's mind all the time, whether it's from a positive standpoint, negative standpoint. So Scott, what are you seeing in the market today with clients related to AI?
So what we're seeing is incredible pressure to innovate with AI so that clients can improve productivity, drive growth initiatives, et cetera. You can't follow anyone's quarterly or annual report without the mention of AI. If you don't hear about it, the stock goes down. If you do hear about it, the stock goes up.
Yep.
And so these organizations are pursuing this innovation, and they're talking to us about helping them transform on this AI journey. And from my perspective, we're helping them from cybersecurity services secure that journey.
Well, that's certainly important. And Akiba?
Yeah, I think just picking up where Scott left off, that's really the big issue is how do we secure that journey, and how do we do this differently than it's happened in the past? Because we've seen other mass movement towards cloud, mass movement towards application modernization, and security was a bit of an afterthought, and it came later. And we're already seeing evidence that that's already happening again, right? There's a mass rush to get generative AI deployed in organizations. And the people in charge of building the generative AI are not necessarily security experts. The security teams don't necessarily know what AI life cycles look like. And it's a whole new threat landscape that they have to figure out. So there's an awful lot right now. There's a lot of education. That's why it's such a topic here at RSA. And that's why we're talking about all of this all the time, is because people are really grappling with what are the top challenges? How do I think about this? And it's really a shared responsibility. It's a shared responsibility by those that own the AI models and those that are responsible for security in the organization. So given that it's a shared responsibility, how are we actually going to come together to actually solve for some of these things? So there's early days, early in the maturity cycle. What I'm hoping is that we're going to do enough focus on secure by design from the get-go this time around.
And those are excellent points. And certainly we talked about it, that AI is in its infancy. We certainly don't understand all of it yet and how it works and what needs to happen. And as you mentioned, it's not a one spot in the organization that owns the AI. Mm-hmm. And we have AI being touched upon by many different facets of the organization, but they're not talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And as it's being deployed or developed, it needs to happen in a symbiotic way that's good for the organization in a way that it's a positive outcome.
Exactly.
And not, as you mentioned, the rush towards it because we have to keep up with everyone else.
That's right.
So very good points. Thank you for that. And there's a lot of focus on government in AI. And where does cybersecurity fit in that?
So I think at the highest level, if you think about what is the risk in generative AI, it's about trustworthiness. You can't use something that you don't trust. So there's a lot of focus on, well, what makes an AI model trustworthy? Can it be biased? Can it hallucinate? Can it be manipulated, right? But that can it be manipulated is all about its security and its security components of how that entire pipeline and AI pipeline and lifecycle is secured. So you don't have trustworthy AI if it's not secure. So how do you establish that? And a lot of the AI governance frameworks and a lot of the technologies, the teams, the methods, they really focus on all the other elements. And what we're really advocating is that security has to be right there at the same position as bias and drift and hallucination. It's part of the risk around a given model. there's already a risk framework around AI models. Security has to be an important component of that.
100%. Security always has to be built in from the ground up. And we've seen with different technologies and different advances in our systems and everything else that if security is not built in from the get-go, it's just a problem waiting to happen.
Exactly.
And Scott, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, first of all, in total agreement. So we're helping, from a consulting perspective, our clients establish that framework within the organization and establish a shared responsibility model so that there's clarity on roles and responsibilities in the organization. We're also helping them understand the new risks that these technologies introduce. There are traditional security solutions that are required to secure AI applications, things like data security, credential management, right, protecting the infrastructure. So those traditional methods and controls are required. But then with the advent of new risks, like things like prompt injection and other new risks that Gen AI introduces and AI introduces, we're having to bring new methodologies. We're having to bring new partners to the table from our ecosystem partners to help solve those challenges.
You know, this important thing that you also mentioned, obviously everything's important to talk about, but our whole frame of looking at security has changed, that we are now reliant on partners and bringing in partners as we're better together. And I think in the past, it was very much a siloed effect of they do what they do well, we do what we do well, and let's just see what the outcome is. And I know that IBM is a leader in looking at that and understanding that with partnerships, they're able to bring the best of breed to the table and make what they have even that much better and let the others utilize what they have to make their solutions, much more effective along the way.
I think that too, that the framework that you establish, right? Most large organizations have some sort of governance framework. It has to be, and there's a compliance team that's a part of that as a stakeholder. There's the AI, the data and the AI teams that are part of that as a stakeholder. There's the security teams, there's legal, there's risk, there's a lot of stakeholders within that. That is the place that you have to come together and thinking about how you will employ new policies and how you will think about now putting for the new types of risks that exist around AI as an extension around, so that there is, and that's part of what we want to see evolve as well, is that companies are really not taking the siloed approach internally either. Yeah. I can't emphasize the shared responsibility enough, and that means you have to be designing this together, and you have to be thinking about each other's perspectives so that you're actually designing the right thing from the start, like you mentioned, secure by design.
Certainly, and also you did mention that you have to think about the new security risks around AI. I think a lot of organizations are looking at it as, what is AI going to do for me to either better, faster, stronger, more insight, all these positive, wonderful things that we're looking at from a positive lens. But there's also the negative things that we have to look at. What are the security risks? What are the issues that we have to contain and secure in order to utilize AI for the good? Exactly. So that's also something we have to think about. So we certainly think about cybersecurity when it comes to really any advancing, any new technology or a technology that we're moving along within our ecosystems, whether it be in cloud, whether it being IoT, and certainly in AI. How would you feel, or how would you discuss cybersecurity when it comes to AI?
Well, so we look at it from two dimensions. One is securing AI, and one is AI and security. And I think both are going to be important because it's not going to be sufficient to have just humans alone protecting the organization against AI. So we're helping clients deploy AI technologies from IBM and our ecosystem partners into their security operations teams and programs so that they can better defend the organization, assess the risks, understand where they're vulnerable, understand that attack surface, but also incorporate these new Gen AI applications into their incident response plans and procedures. And then from a securing AI perspective, it's leveraging the traditional methods as we've talked about, but also looking at threat modeling of the LLMs and of these applications, testing the applications before they're moved into production, and ensuring that new threats like the prompt injection and others can be prevented.
Can you talk to a use case specifically that you've seen in IBM that really talks to what you spoke about? And I think that would be very beneficial for our audience to really understand what you've just described.
Well, I'll share a client example. So I was on a conversation with a client. IBM was working with a client to deploy a new customer transformation application that was Gen AI powered. So it was going to be interacting with their clients. They were running a POC, but they hadn't factored security in from the start. So as I was explaining the risks involved in securing Gen AI, the client said to me, well, this is in the POC. The team that's deploying the application hasn't been able to answer any of the questions that our security teams are asking. and now we're concerned we won't be able to move into production. So we came to the table with our expertise, our tools, our ecosystem partners, and we ensured that the application was secure so that we could move it into production.
Oh, that's certainly very important.
So we've actually developed a framework for how to think about security for AI, and I'll draw it here. Right? There's really three major components if you think about the new attack surface, the new threat surface. Right? We talk about secure the data, secure the model, secure the usage.
Yes.
Okay. So the data and all of the elements that come into that training data, not only if you take a third-party model that's been trained by external data, but most organizations, if they're really making it useful in their own context, they have to link their business data to it, right? So there's a whole set of issues and series around data poisoning and data exfiltration and all these other things, right? So secure the data is one part of the framework that you have to really think about and how you're going to go about doing that. The model itself can be manipulated. And so how you secure the model, how you really, understand all of its elements, and then the usage, the applications that, as Scott was just mentioning, that are connected to that model, and the data that's actually connected to the model and which applications, right? So you have to understand that entire landscape and its connectivity to be able to identify where you might have risk vulnerabilities across all of that landscape. So that's kind of the three major things that are new about generative AI, underpinned by secure the infrastructure, which Scott's already talked quite a bit about, underpinned by the entire AI governance around it. So if you take that framework and you really sort of drill into each of those areas, you start to uncover and think about, really where you need to have appropriate focus in how you're thinking about securing AI models.
That's true visibility into it, which I think, how do you move forward in the organization without the proper visibility? And I think that beautiful model that you just drew, really
shadow AI is shadow AI. Now we've had shadow IT, shadow data, shadow everything. Right now we've got shadow AI, and that visibility is like step one. You have to have visibility to what's even operating in the organization, because that alone is kind of a starting point. And that's where a lot of organizations are right now, because anybody can bring anything in, right? Even if there's a policy, there's nothing that physically stops somebody from downloading a third-party model and deploying it somewhere inside the enterprise. So really even understanding what you have deployed and getting that level of visibility, right? It's kind of, there's so much more that's going to evolve in this space over the coming months and years, but it sort of starts with visibility.
Certainly. I know a lot of CISOs I spoke to is they just don't have the visibility.
Exactly.
They just don't know what they own. They don't know what they have. They don't know where things sit or who even touches it.
Exactly.
And a lot of different solutions out there are kind of giving the overall scheme of things, but not diving down to the deep nitty-gritty of it, which is critical.
I know. And that's what we're working on from the technology perspective. So we're actually working on a technology that will look at that end-to-end pipeline in terms of how we think. We're using that framework I described to think about how we're even engineering the technology to help solve the problem and automate those issues and visibility and how you prioritize and how you actually go address some of those issues.
That is something very much needed in our ecosystem. So very much looking forward to hearing about that and seeing that.
Yeah.
And AI is a big topic on everyone's mind right now, but quantum also is rapidly gaining more interest. What are you seeing happening on this space? Because everyone's thinking it's 5 years out till we actually see something happening, but we all know that's not true. It's in its infancy, yet there's things happening. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we've been working with clients for over 5 years now on this subject. The more mature clients, especially large financial institutions in Europe, in the United States, et cetera. We've been partnered with teams within IBM software, within IBM research to develop tools that will allow clients to assess where they may be vulnerable. And from a methodology perspective, we help clients. It's not a point solution to fix the problem once. It's about becoming crypto agile. And we have an approach to allow clients to get on that journey today, understand where the risks are, but also modify their approach to application development and managing keys and other aspects of their application stack, and prepare them for the eventual risks that quantum will introduce.
How far out do you think we are from actually seeing that become fruitful?
So the estimates vary. I don't know if you have...
The estimates vary in terms of when will a quantum computer, actually be in a position to break traditional cryptography. But I think that it's now, in the sense that I think when people start to really dig into understanding cryptography is so widespread And just like application modernization, and when you get into it, right, it's a multi-year journey. So is this going to be. And so what people, I think, where a lot of companies are right now and organizations are, is just assessing their risk. They need to first understand what is my actual risk and building the roadmap, because there's no 1 year solving this problem, right? It is going to be a long-term kind of thing. And you're going to find much more vulnerability in your cryptography than you're ever going to be able to humanly address. So you're going to have a way to prioritize that. So that's part of what we're working with. The state of now is, how do I inventory what my problem is? How do I prioritize when I'm going to go about it and build my roadmap for how I'm going to do that? And then as we go forward in the permanency, right, and monitoring for changes and all that good stuff. And then how do I actually, there's a really significant shift when we talk about crypto agility, right? Because decoupling cryptography from applications and managing something centrally is a fundamental change in the way, it's going to turn encryption and cryptography on its head in a lot of ways. So it's now, in terms of the length of time it's going to take you to address, that you need to start thinking about how to assess that risk. There's a lot of speculation, and I don't know any of us can 100% predict, but it's within this range of what we've been describing, right? And in less than a decade where that happens. And I don't know, everything keeps getting sooner. The more data I see, it keeps coming in and in and in. But it's really about understanding where you are now and the realization that the timeline for what you're going to do is going to happen over some number of years. So you need to get started at least understanding what your journey is going to look like, so that you can prepare your organization, your staffing, your budgets, your everything, right, for how you're going to deal with that in the going forward.
Well, certainly I think we have to look at it with the lens that we're also looking at AI. It's not just a positive outcome for us with the maturity of AI, but the maturity of quantum. There's also the negative aspect that's going to come at us that much quicker, better, faster, with much more detailed, quick targets at our backs.
That's right.
Is that something that you're focused on as well, in terms of, I know a lot of organizations saying, I don't want to deal with this. This is something that is beyond me.
Yeah.
We
won't have a choice, because cryptography, it's all, at the end of the day, it's all about getting into the data and the systems, right? And that's your protection layer. And if that protection layer isn't there, there's nothing more catastrophic than that in terms of an existential threat to your business.
Certainly.
If your most important systems and data can be accessed, right? So some people compare it to the Y2K. It's not a Y2K analogy in the sense that it's not a date that everything's going to change. But it is an analogy in the sense that it is fundamentally every system that has to, at some level be looked at, assessed, and evaluated if there needs to be a quantum safe cryptography, right, that's going to be implemented in that infrastructure.
Almost like a cyber hygiene across your organization on multi-levels.
Yes.
Being around AI.
And it is daunting. It's daunting and it's overwhelming. But that's why you have to kind of start to assess what's your situation to be able to kind of take that in a more reasonable path.
Certainly, that's an area of being proactive in your cybersecurity stance and not just reactive, because we have to be both.
Right.
But certainly with this coming to be in the mature state that it is, there's a lot to be excited about. But as you mentioned, being prepared, understanding the fundamentals, and really preparing the organization in a way that they're ready and not just hands thrown up in there trying to scramble once it actually hits in a very impactful way.
Exactly.
And I'd love to ask both of you if you have any final thoughts around this topic for our audience.
Well, my thought would be, we've used the analogy of the cloud transformations, and we've learned a lot through that journey. And as we've said, we're seeing repeating patterns from that cloud journey. So I think one of the reasons we ran into those troubles as part of the cloud journey was security wasn't enabling the business to achieve their business objectives at the speed of the business.
Right.
And security teams need to upskill. Mm-hmm. They need to become an enabler of the business. And I think business leaders need to be partnering with their security teams to make sure that they're secure by design at the outset, and they're not having to go back and retrofit these applications and add security back in after the fact, because we know that's the most costly way to approach this problem.
100%. And that also leaves holes in the systems of trying to put a Band-Aid on a gap where security should have been built in. So very important information. Any final thoughts around this topic?
Just, I think, in the spirit of education, I wanted to mention, just a couple days ago, we released a new study. So IBM's Institute of Business Value does a lot of thought leadership type of work, and we do a lot of surveys of very senior executives. And we just did one on securing generative AI, so very timely to the discussion. And some of the results and the insights from that, I think, will be interesting to the audience to be able to understand, including 24% of Gen AI projects right now being secured, right? So a very, very small percentage of overall projects being secured, but also talking in more detail about some of the things we've been talking about, but in, a much more lengthy document. So I would encourage anyone to take a look at that as well. You can find it out on our website if you just Google Securing Generative AI from IBM Business Value Institute, and hopefully that's useful to some of the audience to read up on that, and help with the education and getting things moving in the conversations and being the representation. I think that's another thing I've been advocating for. Be the representation in your organization for helping to understand what the risks are, why it's important, and why it's a shared responsibility.
Oh, very important. And I also like to ask my interviewees for a cybersecurity business tip or helpful hint to our audience, whether it being something personal for the everyday person out there, for an organization, but something that you feel passionate about in the cybersecurity world. So let's start with you, Akiba.
Okay. My tip is don't talk in technical terms.
That's a good tip.
Please. It's such a thing, and security people go there so fast. But when you are trying to convince the senior leadership, when you are trying to convince the AI teams, when you are trying to really communicate with anyone, you have to do it in a way that is in their language, not your language. And so that's my number one.
That's a good one.
So my tip is that this is coming fast.
Yeah.
And we're all learning, frankly.
We are.
Right? I mean, we have together learned over the past 24 months or so, and the industry is learning. So I think we all need to, as cybersecurity professionals, need to develop an eminence in this topic. And it's okay to, acknowledge that you might not know what you need to know today. But I think Akiba's tip is a very good one. And but develop the skills necessary to help your business, protect the organization as we all go on this journey together.
That's excellent. Well, Akiba and Scott, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for the information shares. I know our audience really enjoyed our conversation today, and I look forward to many more conversations with you both. And this is Shira Rubinoff with On the Road at 6.5 Media here at RSA 2024. Thank you for joining us today.